The morning sun spilled over the busy streets of Manila, lighting up cracked sidewalks, honking jeepneys, and the endless flow of people chasing survival. Among them was a thin 12-year-old boy named Mateo. His slippers were worn down to the foam, his shirt hung loose on his shoulders, and his hands were rough from years of odd jobs. Every day after school, Mateo wiped tables at food stalls, carried groceries for strangers, or played music wherever he could find an audience. Music was the one thing that made the hunger fade. Mateo had never owned a piano. He had never even touched one. But behind a closed music academy near a wealthy district, there was an old broken upright piano placed near the entrance's decoration. Some keys were chipped, others yellowed with age, but every evening, when no one was watching, Mateo pressed those keys softly, memorizing the sounds, imagining full melodies in his head. He learned by listening, by watching videos on borrowed phones, and by practicing silently on wooden tables, tapping rhythms with his fingers. That day, Mateo wandered into an upscale shopping plaza where polished floors reflected chandeliers and designer storefronts. He wasn't begging. He was simply looking for a place to rest. In the center of the plaza stood a grand piano, glossy black, guarded by a sign that read "For guests only." A small crowd surrounded it as a sharply dressed woman sat nearby, her diamond bracelet flashing under the lights. Her name was Veronica Caldwell. She was the wife of a real estate millionaire visiting Manila for charity events. To her, the city was a backdrop, the people a blur. She prided herself on elegance, discipline, and control. When she noticed Mateo standing near the piano, eyes fixed on the keys, her lips curled with amusement. The security guard moved to shoo him away, but Veronica raised her hand. She studied the boy, his dirt-stained clothes, his nervous posture. "Do you play?" she asked, her tone dripping with skepticism. Mateo swallowed. A few people paused to watch. He nodded slowly. Veronica laughed, not loudly, but sharply enough to sting. "You look like you can barely afford shoes," she said. "And you think you can play a piano like that?" Mateo felt heat rush to his face. He wanted to leave. He should have left. Instead, Veronica stood and made an announcement that echoed through the plaza. "If you can play this piano well," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'll adopt you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some thought she was joking. Others sensed cruelty beneath her smile. Mateo froze. "Adopt you," she repeated, as if offering a prize. "I'll take you out of poverty. Give you a home, education, a future. But if you fail, you leave and never touch a piano here again." The words felt heavy, unreal. Adoption was not just a promise. It was a life. Mateo's mother had died 2 years earlier. His father was gone long before that. He lived with an aunt who already struggled to feed her own children. The idea of a home, of security, felt like a dream too fragile to touch. The crowd murmured. Some whispered that this was cruel. Others urged the boy to try. Mateo's hands trembled as he stepped closer to the piano. Veronica leaned back, confident. To her, this was entertainment. A lesson about knowing your place. Mateo sat down. The first touch of the keys sent a shock through his body. This piano was nothing like the broken one he practiced on. It was alive, responsive, powerful. For a brief second, fear crept in. Then he closed his eyes. He began softly, a simple melody, hesitant but pure. Conversations faded. Phones lowered. The music grew, flowing into something deeper, richer. His fingers moved with certainty, dancing across keys he had never touched before, pulling emotion from muscle. Memory and imagination. He played not to impress. He played to survive. The melody turned complex, layered with sorrow and hope. People felt it in their chests. Some wiped their eyes. A woman covered her mouth in disbelief. Even the security guards stood frozen. Veronica's smile vanished. Mateo finished with a final chord that hung in the air like a held breath. Silence. Then applause exploded. Not polite clapping. Thunderous applause. Veronica stood stiff, her face pale. This was not how it was supposed to go. She forced a smile and clapped slowly, her mind racing. She had never intended to adopt him. It was a performance, a power move. "Well," she said, clearing her throat. "That was unexpected." The crowd waited. She leaned toward Mateo and lowered her voice. "You did well," she said. "But adoption is complicated. Legal processes. International laws." "I was speaking metaphorically." The crowd reacted instantly. Booing. Shouts of shame. Phones pointed at her face. A man stepped forward. He introduced himself as Daniel Reyes, a Filipino-American music producer visiting from California. He had recorded the entire performance. "You made a promise," Daniel said calmly. "And that boy changed everyone in this room." Veronica stiffened. She didn't like being challenged. She turned to leave. Mateo watched her walk away, the applause fading into disappointment. The dream shattered just as quickly as it appeared. But the story didn't end there. Daniel approached Mateo and asked where he learned to play. When Mateo explained, Daniel's eyes filled with disbelief. He offered to help. Not with charity. With opportunity. Weeks later, the video went viral in the United States. Millions watched the wealthy woman mock the boy. Millions watched him play. Public outrage followed. Veronica's name trended for days. Her charity partnerships quietly disappeared. Invitations were withdrawn. Her image of grace and generosity cracked. Meanwhile, Daniel arranged for Mateo to receive formal training in Manila. Donations poured in. A local school offered a scholarship. A donated piano arrived at Mateo's aunt's home. Made notes soared. Months passed. Mateo performed at events, his confidence growing. He spoke little, but when he played, people listened. One evening, Daniel called with unexpected news. An international music foundation wanted Mateo to audition in New York. Mateo had never left the Philippines. The audition changed everything. Judges were stunned. Offers followed. Education. Mentorship. A future shaped not by pity, but by talent. And Veronica. She watched from a distance as the boy she dismissed rose higher than she ever imagined. She released a statement, claiming misunderstanding, but the world had already judged. Years later, Mateo stood on a grand stage in the United States, performing before thousands. He dedicated the performance to every child told they were nothing. "Sometimes, cruelty reveals greatness," he said softly. "And sometimes, the promise meant to humiliate becomes the spark that changes a life." Ending engagement.